Okay. So again, thanks, Dora, for the warm welcome. I'm super excited about today's topic, the futures of democracy. We have Katharina Beitz with us from the Initiative for Digital Justice, Ilan Siebert and Jonas Beichert from Es geht los, who focus on citizen councils. And so, yeah, before we jump into today's topic and speakers, I will first give you some technical guidelines, tell you a little bit about the Speculative Futures Berlin events, and then give you a brief insight into foresight and speculative design. So again, it's going to be recorded, and also we are going to ask you some questions in polls. So please feel free to interact with us. We don't want you to fall asleep behind the screen. We are also going to have a Q&A session in the end where you can ask us some questions. After each talk, you get the chance to ask questions about the topics. But please hold back with your big discussion questions. We will leave that for last in our Q&A. And then last but not least, I don't know how you found out about our event today. We have many channels that we communicate this event on. So if you want to stay connected and really make sure you don't miss the next event, then I invite you to follow us on our meetup group and on our social channels like Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn. And yeah, so now we can dive into Speculative Futures Berlin. And it belongs to the International Design Futures Initiative based in New York. And our chapter here in Berlin is the biggest chapter in Europe with over 1,400 members. And it's not just a voluntary organization, like most of them are. It's run and powered by Ellery Studio, the creative strategy agency. And yeah, so what we want to do with Speculative Futures Berlin is we want to give people a stage to people that are already walking the talk in shaping our future. And we work with organizations, institutions, and individuals that bring desirable futures and sustainable transformation to life. And also, if you have an interesting project or idea that you think needs to be heard, please reach out to us. We would really be excited to look into it. And yeah, today, obviously, we're doing it digitally, and we used to do this analog in the studio in Kreuzberg at Ellery. And the first digital format actually happened at the previous Spec Futures event at the Natural History Museum in Berlin. And you can see how it usually looks in our office. And yeah, so some of the topics that we have discussed previously is, for example, ethics and AI. The last one was on food fictions with the Fraunhofer IAO. And also we talk about methods, we have future methods such as world building or speculative fiction and design fiction. And now to get into the juicy stuff, as we constantly deal with complex and dynamic systems in our world that we're not only uncertain about, but we're also uncertain about how to deal with it right now. That's where foresight and speculative design come in. And because right now, many challenges like the climate crisis that we're facing seem so unfixable. And the only way to overcome them is by changing our values, beliefs, attitudes, and behavior. And before we continue, I wanted to ask you in a poll if you have heard of foresight before, if it's your first time, or if maybe you have worked with foresight before, or maybe it's a completely new topic to you. Yeah, there's our poll. So go ahead and tell me where we're at. Just 6 more people. Okay. So I think it's quite mixed. Yeah, okay. So some people have heard of it. It's new to some others. I'm going to tell you a bit more about it now so that we all are on the same page. And yeah, so foresight is, this is a diagram to kind of show what it's about. It's a way for us to deal with this uncertainty that I was talking about earlier, and basically is created by thinking about the future and debating about the future and shaping the future. And what's really important is that it's not about trying to create a prophecy or trying to predict what's going to happen. It's more about helping to find action and building it. That's why it's action oriented and it's participatory. And yeah, so foresight invites us to consider the future as something that we can create or shape rather than something that already is decided. Because that's the beautiful thing about a future that's not predetermined. Like we have all this room for action, and we can actually do something about how we want the future to look. And here, this is where speculative design comes in. It's a beautiful tool when exploring and shaping the future in a humanity-centered way. What I mean by that is traditionally design works, or we design for a world that is currently, versus in speculative design, we try to design how the world could be. And so that means it thrives on imagination, and it aims to open up new perspectives, to create spaces for discussion and debate about alternative ways of being, and to inspire and encourage people's imagination. And this can go in two ways. It can show in how we want to live, but also how we really do not want to live. So you probably know Black Mirror as an example. A lot of their narratives are based on like a wake-up call to show how we probably don't want to end up. And this brings us to our next slide, which means where we step away from probable and plausible futures, and we step into a realm of unreal, of the fictional or the conceptual, which means the leading question is not what the future most likely will look like, but what is possible, and how can we create the future we wish for or are trying to avoid. And evidently, speculative design and foresight are trying to stimulate our thinking and are trying to set impulses. So we don't take things for granted, we're skeptical and are always questioning what is given. And what we try to do is to encourage thought and expose assumptions, especially innate assumptions, and to provoke action and offer new perspectives. And that is a way of shaping the future. And yeah, so now we can dive into our topic. Before, make sure you finish your last tweet, you switch off your phone and enjoy the ride. I came up with the concept, or the concept for tonight, the futures of democracy. And that happened because I don't think I've ever been so invested in a US election like I have this year. And actually that brings me to my next poll question to you guys. Did you also follow the US elections as feverishly, or did you just like check it out here and there, or you didn't give it so much thought? Okay, I guess I'm alone in the live streaming all day. Oh no. Okay, cool, interesting. Well, it's good to know that no one didn't care. Okay, great. Yeah, so also with the German elections coming up next year and in fall, I couldn't help but wonder about the state of our political system. Like our democracy is about 70 years old now, and like it never stops, right? So tonight's topic is the futures of democracy, because I wanted to know what are the current ideas or visions tackling the status quo, and what best practices do we have, insights and methods of future-oriented approaches. And yeah, so that's why we're talking about the futures of democracy tonight. And now I am excited to hand you over to Katharina Beitz and see what impulses she's following with her digital justice initiative. or in German it's called digitale Gerechtigkeit. And besides of that, Katharina is a co-founder. She does a lot of things. She's a co-founder for Resilient Resident, which is a smart city company, and she started this initiative that she's going to tell us more about now. Before we tap into that, we have one poll question that Katharina was curious about. And she wanted to know if you think that existing technology has basically brought good things or bad things into the world, like on an average, like what do you think? Okay, that's very interesting. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna leave you here and I'm gonna open up the curtain for Katharina. One second.
Is technology good or bad for democracy?
You can't hear her?
And you can enlist all the bad things on the one hand, right? Cybersecurity, privacy data breaches, biased algorithms, discriminatory design. So technology and products which are only created for the majority.
Okay, hang on. I'm gonna fix that.
Also.
Okay, let's try this again. Just like tell me in the chat if you can hear her.
Hey, thank you for the invitation. When I got invited to this event, I just watched the documentary The Social Dilemma on Netflix. And to say the least, I was...
What is happening?
I can hear her.
Okay. Dodo, I think it's just you. Okay, I'm gonna start it again, yeah?
Hey, thank you for the invitation. When I got invited to this event, I just watched the documentary The Social Dilemma on Netflix. And to say the least, I was rather disappointed. The question they asked was bold. You get this question asked very often if you work in tech or in business. And it's one of the greatest questions. It's one of the most relevant nowadays. Is technology good or bad for democracy? And you can enlist all the bad things on the one hand, right? Cybersecurity, privacy data breaches, biased algorithms, discriminatory design. So technology and products which are only created for the majority, average, or the able-bodied people. Technology addiction also. So we have also some good ideas on products on the other hand, right? We have, we can stay informed. In fact, we could be more informed than ever before. We can collaborate and we can help through petitions. In fact, NGOs completely changed their business model because there is online funding and finances changed completely. You can have long distance communication. You can work remotely. You can have social virtual events like that. And of course, and even if it's thrilling to say that's not good, but shopping is so much easier for people in need and families and elderly people. So almost everyone answering these topics in a keynote lecture will conclude with technology is a tool. Technology is a tool. It's based on the culture, on the connections, and on the relationships people build around these tools. So technology isn't good or bad. That's the answer. It's a tool. Technology is based on the culture people build around these tools. So it's a people, right? But what happens when the culture we build around isn't made to make everyone tech savvy? What happens when we have a smart city, but we don't have smart citizens? And what happens when these tools aren't tools for everyone? And how do we change that? So hi, I'm Katharina Beitz. I'm the initiator of Initiative Digitale Gerechtigkeit. I'm also the co-founder of Resilient Resident, a smart city startup. And I'm consulting companies on data-driven strategies with my third company called Overbytes. And today I want to continue the keynote where most of the articles maybe stop. Maybe it's too complex or maybe it's too overwhelming. And after this talk, I want to read or I want to listen to your ideas rather than mine, because I know mine. And I'm interested how the audience is interested in technology and how we solve some of the issues I will bring up here. So, but let's get back to the question. What's equality and what's equity? Philosophical problems arise when language is on holidays. Ludwig Wittgenstein once wrote that, and I think it's really important to have that in mind, because one could say, okay, Katharina, equality and equity, that's just like, well, you can use that as synonyms. At first, I just want to give you a short differentiation, and you will see that these are not synonyms. They definitely aren't. Roughly, you could say that equality means to treat everyone the same. Equity is the idea that everyone has various paths and challenges along the way, but gives people what they need on these individual pathways to achieve that. So you could say for equity, people are treated fairly, but differently. For equality, it means sameness. Every individual gets the same what I get. And as you can state from this point, equity is often called the way to reach equality. And this is a really important and relevant differentiation. I will also go into this because this is a topic right now. What is digital equality and what is digital equity? Digital equity ensures that every person, community, or organization gets the technology capacity to participate in our society. So you get the tools. Digital equality is often paraphrased as a result of equity. You have all the tools and you have equal tools. We could have a full year-long seminar around that, and we could explain and explore a bit more. There are dozens of well-researched and non-well-researched theories and statements, but for the sake of the keynote, I will leave it like that. But I will give you some statistics and data. Where are we right now? Only 2% of today's 8th graders are able to access information found online. 53% of Americans say that the internet has been essential during the pandemic. And the map shows the percentage of people using the internet right now. In Norway, it's 96% of the population. In Somalia, it's 2% of the population. And you can call that digital divide. There are reasons, and they're geographically and economically to these numbers. To dig deeper, and because it's such a huge topic, I will focus some of my statements on smart cities. And the reason behind that is, for me, pretty clear. The development of smart cities is crucial for a progressive global infrastructure. And actually, it is a perfect exemplification. In fact, and you see with the use case of smart cities, why smart cities fail and what the problem is when we talk about smart cities and smart citizenship. So smart cities are called out everywhere, right? You get a smart city, you get a smart city, everyone gets a smart city today. sensory systems, we avoid traffic jams, we track empty car parking lots, and we ease the dense city. Actually, when I worked as an associate researcher at the Humboldt Institute in Berlin, we maintained especially smart city projects. When we created hackathons, dozens of people, mostly engineers, designers, or game developers, came to our events and competitions. I thought we, and in general, the whole concept of smart city, have a moment here. And then I went out with my friends and I told them everything about my week. They looked at me and I saw some questions in their faces, and I expected something like inspiring debates, huge discussions about the most crucial questions right now in smart city concepts. In fact, I got the question, what is a smart city? A smart city is the idea that by observing, collecting, and efficiently transforming data, we gain insights to improve our cities. From mobility to energy consumption to Wi-Fi infrastructure, the smart city is here to enhance our quality of life. So it's a lot of databases, and it's based on databases, right? A lot of sensorings. And at some point, after all these hackathons and academic research, I realized that we forget something. We didn't forget it accidentally. We threw them under the bus. Humans. We forgot humans. I realized during the next years that expert panels, hackathons, academic research, and writing papers are great things to do. They're officially great, but they won't get us anything near to close the digital divide. The efforts in science are great and research is useful, but smart city concepts right now are failing. And even worse, when citizens of a city aren't interested in developing a sense for technology around them, it's highly likely that corporations will build software and products where the people are just data sets to monetize on them. They develop sensors, efficient Wi-Fi, and interconnected devices no one cares about. In fact, most of the critiques of smart cities nowadays are mentioning that the smart city concepts we have are too instrumental and too technical. So you could say, the smart city fails when smart citizens fail. The idea that people will just arrive and use products and technology because it's now there for them is misleading. It's the wrong statement to every business, and most of them know that. That's why user testing is such a huge topic in entrepreneurship and business modeling. But I will correct myself. People will come, but after a while they stay away. I will give you an example for that. This is a Bosco Verticale in Milan, and it's one of the greatest examples. And it's not one of the greatest examples the government wants it to be. It's a great example for marketing. Some information about this building are mesmerizing. There are 800 trees on that, 20,000 bushes, and they had to be tested in wind canals before they were put up. It took workers 1 year to get the plans on the building, and there are 3 gardeners maintaining this object and roping down on the balconies. It costs €1,500 per month per person to maintain this building, €1,500 per month per person. So this does not include any renting cost though. It's a beautiful, Instagrammable example how the smart city should look. Many people visit that building, but let's be very clear. It's not a smart city project. It's a prestige, shiny object for high-income earners. And there are dozens of great green initiatives in cities. And I don't want to blame them all, but there's a gap between us, citizens of a city, and the smart cities we watch unfold nowadays. And I'll quote a study here. So far, governments have learned that top-down initiatives or a master planned approach are not the determinants of success. Drivers for success a democratic collaboration, and a human-centric approach. I repeat my question from the start of this keynote, besides all the smart city stuff. How do we get there when we don't have people who know about technology? How do we inform people, and how do we engage them? Personally, I have an answer, and I'll show you. I have high hopes in citizen development and citizen tech. And why is it? Because the hype is over. And I will show you what I mean by that. This is the Gartner hype cycle, and it's a data-driven trend report. It shows the level of hype around technology, workplace innovation, and as a business leader, it gives you some foresight on where to put your money at. It's not a complicated curve, but there is a lot of analytics behind that. And the Gartner hype cycle is kind of a classical approach in foresetting. It's just a tool, yeah? So it doesn't get everything right. Some things are right, some are painfully wrong. But the curve, how we access things and new innovation over time is highly interesting for us. And what most of the people forget, it's also a graph about attention. Our expectations are the highest when we are at the peak. What do we learn from hypes all the time? They cannot fulfill our expectations. That's where the curve starts to plummet, right here. Our illusions for the technology and our new vision of life vanishes. It's a phase of disappointment, you could say. It's a phase I realized when it came to cryptocurrencies a few years ago. It's exactly the time when people will publish articles about the inflated bubble. And this is something you saw with cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin a few years ago as well. And don't get me wrong, it's a sad time. Here is a time where companies go bankrupt, where people lose their jobs, and where ideas are thrown under the bus. But to our surprise, it's also a chance for professionals. In the moment we reach a plateau, the plateau of productivity, we are on the edge of seriousness. All the dreams and visions are over, and the real work for businesses starts. If you survive the hype as a tech innovation, you can now harvest and nurture an infrastructure which isn't inflated by highest expectations. And this is the hype cycle with all the data from 2020. It shows two different innovations I want to put my finger on today. At first, it's a plateau of citizen development, citizen developers here. Citizen development is the idea that people not related to IT, people who aren't software engineers, start to develop. They know their needs. So there's software, and there's also a movement today which makes it easier for people not too related to tech to develop tech. That's something completely new. The benefits for businesses are huge. The benefits for democratic society are enormous. And the good thing, it's already happening. There are several other concepts, and I recently wrote some articles about that on Medium, how low-code and no-code developments changed our way of science communication during the pandemic. You're right, during the pandemic, it was used of scientists. Basically, it's the idea that you don't have to learn code to use project management tools or to build a website. And I assume most of you use low-code or no-code software. So these are just a few examples, yeah, it's not a full list. We record voices with low-code. We track and list all of our projects for our team. We build websites without using any kind of code. And these tools are called Airtable, Webflow, Zapier, Shopify, MailChimp. You can read it for yourself. It seems kind of obvious right now that we are able to engage people on complex issues when there is monetization involved and if we simplify things. So the question we need to ask ourselves as citizens, how do we maintain a level of attention? How do we stay interested even when we reach the plateau? even when there's no marketing team behind that selling us something. On an individual level, you can ask yourselves right now, do I fall for the shiny object syndrome? How do you inform and engage yourself? Am I only using these tools because they're marketed to me? And as the initiator of the Initiative Digitale Gerechtigkeit, I aim to develop a blueprint and statements, what needs to be done and what are the necessary options so that we as citizens feel responsible again. We also do that by letting non-tech people speak. And that is maybe one of the greatest criteria I have for the whole initiative. Founder and activists, investors, and traditional corporates should speak out. And even if they're non-tech, they should speak about technology and how they approach technology. These perspectives and stories are often needed to show the niches. And the niches they speak to today are the niches we can't reach. If I speak to someone from the steel industry, and he or she writes an article about how the digital steel industry is changing, he or she will reach a complete different audience than I reach. And that's exactly the thing we aim for. Everyone is tired of the typical debates on digitization on expert panels. So I enlisted 3 things, and they're completely different things, but I wanted to give you some insights what we're working on right now. So what I always bring as an advice to people is do the Richard Feynman test. Can you explain what you said to a 6-year-old? Can the expert you are talking to explain what he or she just said to a 6-year-old? And the perspectives that the citizens speak, like I told you before, is something we aim for during the next months. And in long term, we want to create a public interest mapping. So that means that we want to map the fundings and scholarship options. We need to be more transparent. Just really serious. We need to be more transparent. From a side note, as a startup founder, it is really difficult to see all the different conditions and all the different circumstances when you can apply, when you can develop something. And this is where the people stop to develop something. So we work on a map to access every scholarship, to access every funding, and to give insights, to give FAQs, how to apply and something like that. So we have to make every funding and invest option easier. And of course, advocating. This is what I'm here for right now. So, and of course, the most relevant question I have maybe is for you. How do you access and assess technology around you? How do you engage? What do you see as the most engaging innovation right now? And I'm really, really happy to start a conversation right now. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Katharina, for this amazing talk. Wow, like there are so many things that I learned, like especially about the Smart City project.
The second project will be presented by Ilan Siebert. He is a passionate democracy activist, and he's also the initiator of Es geht los. He encourages people to think critically about the state of democracy. I already experienced this. Thanks, Ilan. I think some of you in this Speculative Futures meetup today experienced this already. He is not alone. On his side is also Jonas. Jonas is a designer. He also works with Ilan together at Es geht los. And he likes to shape desirable environments and futures. He not only works at Es geht los, but also in different projects, constellations. And I think you will tell us a little bit more about what the project is all about. So the stage is yours. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Perfect. So I'm going to start, and Ilan will take over in a couple of minutes. And So the topic is the futures of democracy. And the question is, well, if there's a future, what is the past? And speaking of the past, is democracy an old thing, a new thing? We heard Annika in her talk, and actually it's incredibly new, right? Because in its current form, it's only been around in Germany, at least for, let's say, 75 years, right? And hold on, I have to manage the interface of Zoom. I have to minimize it 1 minute because otherwise I can't. Okay, anyway. That was a perfect start. Sorry. So when we think of the past of democracy, then it's very young. But when we look at tech development and other things and how we changed in the last 75 years, well, there's been rapid changes, right? And we've been accelerating a lot in our media, in our tech, and in other things. So when I look at my experience that I have as a user of this tech in 2020, and I might have a different view in this than Katharina, then I have to say I have a great user experience, right? When I look at Spotify, I start with one song, and the algorithm kind of follows me in my taste and predicts novelties when he puts them in my playlist, and it's incredible. And YouTube works similar, right? But when I look at my democratic experience in 2020, and speaking also about the US election, then it's kind of not so convincing right now for many of us. So the question is, why? And many of us designers might think, well, why not make democracy a great user-centered experience? You know, like just break it down, make it simple, make it emotional, and why don't we put some algorithm at work that kind of does a great job? Or wait, have we just maybe been there? And is it maybe what led us here? So it seems that we have to look at democracy in a very different way. It's not what I want in a world that is built around me and it kind of has this user-centered design approach. It's more about what do we want and how can we organize our increasingly complex society so everybody is happy. And it needs or it requires quite a different design approach. So let's take a look at this we. How did we change? And I want to look with you at 3 points in time. So first, in the 19th century, when we just were before our first democratic moves in Germany. And then somewhere in the 1990s, where most of us have been kids. And then today. So, and we want to look at different points. First of all, what is our common knowledge at the time? Second is, what is our common will? And is it known to us as a society? What do we want? And thirdly, who rules? So starting in 1848, the common knowledge, well, we had newspapers at the time. Our great-grandparents had newspapers, but they were really regional and they were not mass media. So there were a lot of regional tendencies, but we kind of lived in different regional bubbles at the time. So there was little common knowledge about, in let's say Bavaria, what the people in Hamburg want or are striving for. And it was pretty much that we lived in our kind of bubble of our family, of our society, and yeah. So there was an unknown public will mostly on a scale of our country. So this whole lecture I have to maybe say is really a little bit Germany or Eurocentric. So that's a little disclaimer maybe. But an unknown public will was not so much important because there was one ruler or a ruling class, and they said, well, who cares? So the question is, then democracy came, and how did that change? Let's look at 1995. I picked up a point of time that is really, really late in the 20th century. We could have as well looked at 1970 or something. It didn't change that much. So our common knowledge, we had broadcasting, the big invention, radio and television in the 20th century that philosophically made a huge difference for us. Suddenly there were news channels, and it was in our routines. Maybe you remember when you were a child, the news were kind of almost a routine in the day. Your parents would watch the Tagesschau in Germany or some other news channel. So there was maybe 2-3 sources we all got our news from. So we all had this common knowledge, and it was really concentrated at the time. And some other thing came up also in the 1960s, also brought from the US, with polls. There was this idea, wow, we can ask 1,000 people of our society on an issue, let it be marketing research or let it be a political prediction on how the election is going to be, and with quite accurate predictions on how the results are going to turn out. It was incredibly interesting for us, and it was incredibly interesting also when we think about the 2020 elections in the US, which were not so predictable in the end. And who rules? Well, the parliament and people we elected to act in our will, right? So let's look only 25 years later at the scenario. Common knowledge. Well, we have billions of sources right now. We have YouTube, we have a lot of broadcasts, we have a lot of TV stations, we have social media, we have a lot of actors who are in the field. So we have really, really an incredible landscape of sources of information where we can get our information from. And that leads, obviously, and he's not here as a leader right now, so he's more as a representative of some phenomenon that is kind of alternative realities. It's not happening on this low scale as we've experienced it in Germany. In Germany, you can go to certain Facebook groups or and experience a whole different view on the corona pandemic right now. But in the US, you can just try out, and right now, 30 days after the election, or I don't know how long, you can go on Fox News and you can go on CNN afterwards, and you feel like there's a total different reality that is told to you. And it's really interesting that we can make up even a ruling on basically an alternative reality. And that comes also with a big mistrust. That's something we know in Germany very well, a mistrust against the media, against this mainstream media, the one that brought us the news only 25 years earlier, but also a mistrust against the elites. And this is something we can see also when we look at Donald Trump, also when we look in developments in Turkey or in other countries where there's an increasingly mistrust against the elites and the ruling class, but also this mistrust in our society, in the left and the right. We have a big loss of trust currently. And something new is coming up, and it will shape us. And I think Elon maybe can tell us a little bit more about it in the discussion, because he's really into that topic right now. Deep fakes. Right now, there's a prediction that by the next election, be it Germany or be it the US, that we can have an incredible amount of deep fake videos that is basically a technology which will be available by many, many people. And this will change our way of how we experience truth and how we experience facts. So this will be really, really interesting. So there's a lot on the left side. And yes, we also have polls. Actually, we have polls. We have a lot of polls right now, but they are sometimes used against us. They are sometimes not really predictable, and they really, really, really are everywhere, but don't play the same role because of the left side here. So there's still a parliament to act in our will, but the question is in whose will? And how is this clusterfuck to be solved, basically? We think this is alarming, and we think that this won't go away. So right now, I have two quotes for you. One is Nina Schick, who is right now really much in the exploration of this deep fake thing, and she says like a liberal democracy is only workable or doable if we have some kind of shared objective reality. And Yuval Noah Harari, who says like trust is the most essential fuel of a society. So the question is, what can we drop here if this up here is really important to us and we want to keep it because we think the last 75 years have been great so far? Then what is our new idea for here? And I think Eugen or Annika has this. No, Dodo, you have this poll, right? We can try it out if it works. So what do you think? Will AI solve the problem? Will we end up in anarchy? Or can democracy only work offline? Sorry, the answers are a little bit polemic in that sense. But we are curious what you think. Okay, so probably we close it. Well, pretty balanced. And we have to tell you we don't know the truth, and we don't know what will happen. We just know we need to act. And we have ideas how we can act. And our ideas is, one of our ideas or our central ideas, let's run the lottery. And I have to click away this stupid Umfrage because it's in the center of my screen right now and I can't really, yeah, right now. So what we are doing is, what we are promoting is something we call a Bürgerrat, which is a citizen assembly that is basically run by, so I was able to click it away. Sorry for the Zoom mess up. We have a citizen assembly with citizens selected through a lot. That is randomly. And our idea is basically, well, we put 100 citizens, or let's say some more, some less, depending on the issue, at one space for 1 to 5 weekends, and we let them discuss on one political issue. And you might ask, well, okay, but why? And the question is really simple, because, I mean, there's many good answers to that, mainly good answers by smart political scientists who think that this will solve certain things. But as a designer, I want to talk about one certain aspect, which is because it works by design like an innovation process and how we do innovation. What we do when we do innovation processes, well, first we get stakeholders at the table, and we get all stakeholders at the table. And by that, when we select citizens to run a citizen assembly, we do a sortition by age, by gender, and by education. That means we tap in all those filter bubbles by randomly selecting a group of 100 citizens, let's say, and we put them together. And we let them talk about the thing and about the issue, let's say the climate change, and let them develop a shared reality, which is kind of the understand the problem phase, right? Everybody needs to get this idea, what are we talking about and what's my personal view on it? And that's a third really important thing for us. We really work with good facilitation and good moderating, because we think it's really important to make every voice heard in these processes, because the most silent voices are the most unrepresented voices of our society might be the most valuable voices in that process. This basically is the empathize phase where we get different perspective on this problem. But we don't stop there. We ask the experts, and experts in that sense may be scientists, maybe economists, but also people who are affected by the issue that you discuss. For example, when we talk about same-sex marriage, as was discussed in the Citizen Assembly in Ireland, of course you have to have homosexuals at the table to talk about their discrimination and talk about how they experience a society where as a marriage is not possible for them or not allowed for them. So we need experts to understand what is possible. And then we let the citizen work in small groups to develop solutions. So this is like the ideation phase. And it's always incredible what good ideas come up and how these ideas almost always are richer than when you always when you would have only put experts at the work, because these mixed groups of citizens will bring much larger perspective or much broader spectrum to the table, and this enriches the result that we finally bring to a parliament and basically to implementation. So it's kind of very simple steps, but what this does is it creates a new we the people. Because what we've done here is like 100 people have discussed a subject and have discussed it in the whole spectrum of the society. So when we talk about we, then there's not this blaming of these elites who have discussed and who have decided on the issue. It's not this blaming of, oh, that's an idea from the left or the right. It's actually we who decided and who went through this process to come up with these ideas. And we think this is a really, really valuable tool right now for our society that can create a shared reality, at least momentarily, at least on one political issue, and it can create something as a common will on this issue. And by this, we think it increases trust in our society and trust in democracy. And now I hand over to Ilan who will tell you a little bit more what we do with it.
Yeah, not only that, thanks thanks for the introduction or to present the story where we come from. Okay, Jonas, you click for me, that's nice. So never before the public is as politically informed as nowadays. So also with this evening tonight, you educate yourself on how democracy could work and what are the challenges we face and this kind of question. But and now Jonas, you need to swap please to the last slide already. The really sad part is, even though we are in a time where not everybody is so informed as now, there's a huge problem, which is we are all waiting until there comes a government which is govern us in a good way, but it's about power and action, and it's about our responsibility. So what we do also currently is we get more information, we get more insights, but it's not about taking action. So with what we do here, we have no impact whatsoever towards how politics is done, which affects us where we can feel proud and nice and safe that we are such smart people who confront themselves with how it should look like. But in the end, and that's the really sad part on the story, because their work follows, is we need to do stuff. And just to not take too much of time, because we're already running an hour, I will shortly introduce to you what kind of work we do. So starting 3 years ago, even more, the aim of Es geht los was to really create the first citizens assembly, which Jonas just briefly explained, on a national level, because we thought we all know what the democratic problems are. We have a couple of pilots on local level on how citizens assemblies work. We have a couple of examples on national level, on federal level, worldwide, how citizens assemblies work. Why don't we do it in Germany? And we need to have a theory of change. We have to have an idea about how change is done. And our assumption was we need to make it as huge as possible, because the pilots were done, the frustration is big, and people care about national level. So we should be able to fundraise €1 million to set up a really good setup citizens assembly on a national level. And when we started, my idea was, let's just go for a citizens assembly with the topic of citizens assembly. So the idea was, let's discuss how we govern ourselves in a certain way, which is citizens assembly itself. But there's many questions. Who's choosing the experts? who's chosen by the lottery? What kind of statistics do we take? Do we take age? Do we take gender? Do we take education? This kind of questions, we need to discuss that as well. So, and during this process, it took me 2 years to discover that's nerd questions nobody cares, which is really hard. So we partnered up with other huge organizations and are now co-initiators on citizens' assemblies on a national level. And the next coming up is a cooperation between the other association, Mehr Demokratie e.V. and us as Geht Los, with the topic of Germany's role in the world, which is quite broad, and there's 3 weekends. But the good thing about it is that the German politician Wolfgang Schäuble, who's also president of the German parliament, will be the chairman of this project. So there's the first line towards politics and towards getting the idea of sortition-based participation, so citizens' assemblies to put it shortly, into German politics. We, on the same time, thought that can't be the only thing we do, because on a citizens' assembly, there's just 100 people or 200 people joining for 3 weekends, so it's not spreading really. And in Germany, we have the chance to speak to our directly elected candidate. So everybody who lives in Germany has 2 voices, not who lives, who's German citizen, has two votes. The first is for a person and the second is just for the party. Nobody knows, even I still don't know who is my directly elected politician within the German parliament, but the idea is that we can address this person. And we thought, okay, if we have this option within the German electoral system, let's just try to get the idea of sortition-based people combined with the person who stands for those people and select 30 to 40 people within this electoral district to give advice to their politician. And therefore that it's interesting for the politician, we offer them to choose their own topic. So we go to the politician and ask him or her, what is the topic you're interested in and being informed by your voters? So what is the topic where you think it's really interesting and I need to figure out what my people think about it? And with this idea, we got 3 politicians with whom we're going to make a pilot. So 3 pilots actually in the upcoming year. The first one was supposed to be in December, but you all heard about COVID and that offline meetings won't work too well currently. So it will be shifted toward next year. And the really nice thing is we got 1 person from the Conservative Party, we got 1 person from the Social Democrats, and we also got 1 person from the Green parties. And that's the other way how we want to infiltrate the political system, that we get people in doing politics and not just being informed about politics. So that's the big change we're going to do. And because this is our approach, how can it be broadened? We also go on with other projects and formats of the same and basic idea of sortition-based, informed, moderated, and being advisory. We say we also want to go into unions and organizations. We are currently speaking with the Hochschule Ruhr-West, which is a University of Applied Science, to create an idea, a vision of how should education look like in 5 years, but not just with the people who are active anyways, people like you who go on a Thursday night to an online talk about democracy, but we are working with also sortition-based participants from the university and experts in surroundings, that we as society get used to this idea and got good experiences, how discussions, how deliberation can look like. So thanks a lot. That's just 3 ideas we are currently working on. And even if you're not the biggest fan of citizens' assemblies, it's really important to me to state it's not about informing yourself how democracy works or what is the best improvement or the best scenario or the best speculative future, but it's about doing things, going out and really, in fact, politics with concrete action. Thanks so much.